Before getting started building either your coil or slab built planters, you'll of course need some clay. You're going to get two pieces. One is going to be big, that's going to be used to build the pot that holds the actual plant, and then you will have a smaller piece of clay with which to build the saucer that goes underneath the pot to catch excess water. While you're working with your clay in class, you need to make sure it always stays on your piece of canvas. It might be on a board or it might just be a piece of loose canvas. And you need to make sure that you work on this at all times because otherwise the wet clay could stick to the table and destroy your piece when you try to remove it. This project will probably take us at least 2 art classes to complete. So when you're done working for today and it's time to clean up, you will carefully remove your piece from the canvas, place it on a styrofoam plate with your name on it, and then slide it into a large Ziploc bag, making sure to zip it closed to contain the moist air inside so that your piece remains malleable for next time we work on it. That's all you need to know for now, but let's get started making our clay pieces, shall we? So the first thing we're going to work on is making a little saucer that's going to collect the excess water when we water our little plants. You'll take your smaller piece of clay for this job, and you're going to twist off just the end of your piece and set it aside for later. And with the larger piece that's left over, roll it into a ball, and then lay it onto the canvas and smash it down, give it a little back massage, a shiatsu massage, and pat it as you turn your piece of canvas to create a circle. Now, some of you out there might want to break outside of the box, if you will, and create a saucer that's a different shape other than a circle. My suggestion is first create a little slab, this little flat pancake of clay, just like I'm doing. And if you'd like to, you can use your wooden clay tools to slice off some of the edges of this circle to change the shape. Or you could do a little bit of hand molding. You could squish in certain parts of the circle's edge to change the shape as well. But for me, I am going to just create a circle. And I know I'm done smashing down the circle when I pick it up and look at it, and it's as thick as an Oreo cookie. And as a rule, every single part of this whole planter project should be at least as thick as an Oreo cookie so that it doesn't become too brittle when it dries and so that it survives its trip down to the kiln. Once you've got a slab that is as thick as an Oreo cookie and it's in just the right shape that you want it, it's time to add a lip around the edge to hold the water in. If your clay at any point throughout this project gets so dry that it starts to crack a little bit, dunk 2 fingers into your bowl of water that you'll have available and rub it on top. If you'd like to smooth out clay that isn't too dry, it just needs a smoothen, then grab a wipe and smooth it out. The wipes have the perfect texture and perfect amount of moisture to make the clay so smooth. It's amazing. So once you've got the base of your saucer all smoothed out in the right shape, thick as an Oreo cookie, it's time to take that other little piece of clay that we tore off from before and roll it into something called a coil. A coil is like a snake of clay used for building. So we're going to take this little piece of clay and we're going to roll it. We're going to start rolling it into a coil by rubbing it in between our hands up here in the air. And then to make a longer coil, we'll lay it down on our canvas and roll back and forth like this. It's important when rolling a coil to make sure your hands are running and rolling all along the coil, not just focusing on the center or on one of the 2 ends of the coil. It's important to keep an even pressure all the way across the coil so that it's the same consistent size all the way down the line. Now we need to roll this little coil long enough so that it fits around the perimeter of our base for our saucer and has a little bit of an overlap. So as you can see, I tested it out and it didn't quite even fit around the circle, let alone have an overlap. So I'm going to need to roll out my coil even longer, which will mean it's a little bit thinner, but that's okay. The lip of your saucer, it doesn't have to be very high. So once you do have a coil that is long enough to fit all the way around the perimeter of your saucer and has overlap, then you're ready to attach it. Mine is actually too long now, so I'm just going to shorten it up by twisting it ever so slightly and cutting off the part that's too long, because it just needs to overlap by a little bit. Now that it's just the right size, it's time to attach the lip of our saucer to the base. And anytime you're attaching two pieces of clay together, you can't just trust that they're going to stick by smooshing them together. You always need to do something called scratching and scoring. And that's when you take a tool, a toothbrush in our case, dipped in water, and you scratch or score or rough up the surfaces of both the pieces of clay that you're attaching. And what this does is creates tiny little suction cups that grab onto each other. And also it creates something called slip, which is water with clay in it. And all that together creates a very strong glue that will keep the pieces of clay together even as they start to dry out. So after your pieces have been scratched and scored and put together, it's time to combine the ends of the coil with a method that I like to call smearing. So the ends of the coil don't look so pretty, especially since they're layered on top of each other. So to get rid of that, use your thumb and gently smear the separation between the clay to turn it into one. And once that's done, you might want to add a smoother edge to your saucer, so you might want to do a little bit of smearing to combine the lip of your saucer to the base. Now from here, you might want to flip it over, see how it's looking on the front. Make sure that that lip is standing up just a little bit from the base of your saucer so that it can hold any extra water and it doesn't just spill right over top. After my hand building is done, I want to make sure that my saucer is really nice and smooth, so I'm going to give it another once over with a wipe. Now, just because this is a saucer that has a job to do in our planter doesn't mean that we can't add more decoration or more extra to this saucer. But for now, before we talk about any of that, we're going to write our names on the bottoms of these saucers with a skewer or a toothpick. And what we're going to do is spell out our name once with the toothpick, wipe off the little clay pieces that will come up, the little clay burrs, and then write our name again. This way we make sure that our name isn't going to disappear and that we all get the correct saucer back with the correct planter. Now that your name is safe on the bottom of this saucer, you can start to think more about embellishment or decorations to this saucer. And you can choose one of two methods. You can choose the subtractive method, which is the one that I chose. The subtractive method is when you take away the mass of the clay. You literally carve away clay, or you push down and stamp into the clay to make your design. So as you can see, I used the clay carving tool to carve out or take away clay in the design of a spiral, and then I used the clay sculpting tools to press into the edge of my saucer and create a texture around there. I could also use the additive method to add decorations to this saucer. The additive method is when you add clay to a piece to add the design or the embellishment. I'm not going to use the additive method right now. I'll show you a lot more about it later. Right now that we have a completed saucer, it's time to make our decision about what kind of pot we're going to make. You will have two choices of creating your pot, the coil pot method or the slab building method. I'm going to show you the coil pot method first. So we're going to go all the way back and grab that big piece of clay that we had all set to go for us. And we are going to twist off just a small chunk of this bigger clay to make the bottom of our coil pot. We want this piece of clay to be just about the same size as the piece we started with to make the saucer, about 1 inch square. And once we've got that, we're going to roll it into a sphere. And we are going to turn this little baby into a baby pinch pot. So take your thumb and make an indentation in the center of your sphere. And then you're going to take your hands and use like a quacking duck movement with your hands, your fingers and thumb. As you rotate or turn the little sphere and quack with your hands, it's going to create a tiny little pinch pot bowl looking thing. Again, you want the walls of this little pinch pot to be about the thickness of an Oreo cookie. And once you have a little bowl going on, you can go ahead and set it and tap it on your canvas to flatten the bottom. And also double check the size. We want our little bowl to be just a little bit smaller than the saucer size. That way we have room to grow, because we're about to start stacking coils on top of this little bowl to create height in the pot. And we're also going to make it wider and wider as it goes up. So let's get started rolling some coils so that we can stack them up and create height and width for our little planters. So grab off a piece of clay from the large chunk. Should be just about as much as you can grab with one fist. Roll it up in the air to get this coil started, and then lay it on the canvas, rolling back and forth, applying even pressure to create a nice, evenly thick coil. Keep rolling it until this coil is long enough to stretch all the way around the edge or the perimeter of the little bowl and have just a little bit of overlap. So I am almost there. I just need to keep going a little bit more so that my coil can overlap the tails. Looks like that's it. So to attach these pieces of clay, of course, I'm going to scratch and score with a wet toothbrush. I'm going to scratch and score the little bowl, and I'm going to scratch and score the coil, and then attach the two together by pressing. And the last thing I need to make sure to do is to smear the separation between the two tails of my coil. Remember, I don't want you to be able to tell where the coil starts and where the coil ends. So I'm going to smear that line that's created between the two of them so that you never knew it was there. Excellent! Coil number 1 is done. But I definitely need some more because I want my planter to be able to hold a lot of dirt, and so I need it to be taller. Like, I want it to be at least 3 inches. Oh, hey, kitty! She likes it so far, but she says I need to keep going. So I'm going to continue rolling coils, making sure they're long enough to stretch all the way around the perimeter with an overlap. I'm going to make sure to scratch and score all of my pieces so that they're glued together, and I'm going to make sure to smear and erase any separations between the tails of the coils. I'm also going to continuously check the size of my pot versus the size of my saucer and how wide my pot is getting. As soon as my pot gets as wide as the saucer, then I know that I need to stop making it wide because it's just right. It'll be perfectly balanced if the saucer on the bottom matches the width of the pot at the top. Now, in a nutshell, that's how making a coil pot works. But I do want you to try to put your own creative spin on this pottery project. What if you made your coils into snakes and you used the additive method to add eyeballs and fangs and the subtractive method to draw or press on a scale texture? Or what if you created a little planter that looks like a beehive and you use the additive method to create little bees that you attached all around the sides? These are just a couple ideas. You could also keep it more simple by changing up the lines or patterns that you put on your pot. For example, I decided to make a really long coil and chop it up into pieces and then spiral those coils to create my next layer of the pot. Not only did it add more height, but it looks way more interesting to me than just a bunch of layers of horizontal coils. Whatever creative spin you decide to put on this coil pot, just make sure that you do not have any holes in the side when you're done. Because remember, we are going to be using these as planters. So we don't want holes in the sides where the dirt and soil can fall out of. If you do have holes in your pot after you've made your creative spin, like I do, just pick up a small, moist piece of clay, and from the inside of the pot, smear that little clay piece right over the hole. So I place it on top of the hole, and then I use the gentle smearing method to smear that clay right across the gap. And I do see I have quite a few more holes, so I need to add more clay smears on the inside. And once this piece is all fired, that layer is going to be really strong, and my pot is going to be able to hold plenty of soil for my plant. I'm going to continue adding some height and some width to this pot, this time just with the regular coil building method. I'm not going to stop until my planter is at least 3 inches tall and that it's as wide as my saucer. So here you can see that my little planter is 3 inches tall, almost exactly, and the opening at the top of my planter is almost exactly the same width as my saucer underneath. So there's one more thing we need to do in order to make sure that this planter is functional, and that is to take a drinking straw and poke it down through the estimated center of the base of your planter pot and pull or drag the straw all the way through to get all the clay out of the way. Now, of course, you can add more embellishments or decorations from here using the subtractive and the additive method. But before you do, please don't forget to write your name really big on the bottom with a skewer or a toothpick. Remember, write it once, give it a wipe, and write it again. So once that's done, I'm going to have some fun with the subtractive method yet again to add some extra fun details to this pot. I'm going to use the back end of one of my pointy tools to make big circular indentations on the spirals, and I'm going to carve out a texture around the rim of my planter. And as we saw before, I also added some spiral design to the saucer and a texture around that edge as well. You can use clay carving tools, which come with a round end and a square end. You can use the stylus tool to draw on or impress on the clay. And you can also use these wooden sculptors to help you change the shape of the clay and for carving and stamping and texturing purposes. That's about it for the coil pot method. Now let's learn how to create a planter with slabs. So remember, a slab is a flat pancake of clay that can then be used to build with. So we are going to, of course, already have a little saucer ready to go with our name on the back, so that's not a problem. We need to pick up our large piece of clay and tear off just about a fistful of clay. And what we're going to do with this is we are going to create the base of our slab planter. So roll it into a sphere to start, and then use the heel of your hand or your fist to give that clay a shiatsu massage in a circle to create a tiny little pancake slab of clay. Now remember, you can change the shape of this base. Just make sure that it's going to fit inside of your saucer, and make sure that it gives you enough room to put some dirt inside for a little seedling, right? And as I suggested before, for when you're making the saucers, it's best to create a round slab to start with and then cut it to the shape that you want from there. I'm going to stick with a circle. My slab is the perfect Oreo cookie thickness, and it's a nice little circle that's smaller than my saucer. So now I'm ready to build the walls of my slab pot. I'm going to take the last bit of my large chunk of clay, and I'm going to roll it into a sphere and use my fist to give a circular shiatsu massage to this larger piece of clay to make a really big slab. We want our slabs to hit at least 6 inches wide so that it's big enough to stretch all the way around our base, right? And you might find that it's hard to make a really smooth, even slab, which is what we want, by doing the shiatsu massage. So another way to stretch out your clay and make it wider and really smooth is to do something I call the frisbee toss. So you pick up your slab like a frisbee and you slide it across the canvas at an angle. Then you grab a new part of the edge of your slab and fling it again. Make sure to be very careful with this process and watch out for throwing it too hard so that it A, flies off your table, or B, folds on itself and makes like a burrito with your slab. We don't want that. Just be kind of careful with this process and double check the size of it every so often, because once you hit 6 inches, you are all set to go. Looks like I didn't quite hit 6 inches yet, so I'm going to keep frisbee tossing, rotating every time that I do the frisbee toss so that it makes kind of like an even slab that I can work with. Once you've got it and your slab is as thick as an Oreo cookie and it's at least 6 inches wide, it's time to pick up either a popsicle stick or the wooden sculpting tool that looks a lot like a butter knife and cut this slab into a rectangle that we can wrap around our base. Now, we do want to be careful because we want to maintain that 6-inch width that we had to work so hard to get. So don't cut off any of the width, and make sure that your pot is going to be tall enough. Our pots need to be probably at least 3 inches tall. So think about those two measurements when you're cutting the rectangle. 6 inches wide, 3 inches tall. Now that we have our slab cut, it's the moment of truth. Let's see if it fits all the way around our base to create the walls of our planter. Wah wah, I did not make this slab long enough. Oh no! It's okay, I have a solution. I'm going to use the leftover pieces of slab from when I cut this thing out. Now I'm just going to go ahead and attach one of the slabs on the end with scratching and scoring and a little bit of smearing to add some length to this slab. And I'm going to cut the piece so that it's nice and even, and making sure to disguise both sides of this little snafu. Once that's all done, my slab is long enough to wrap all the way around the base and has a little bit of overlap for extra strength in that joint. So now all I need to do is scratch and score all the pieces and put it all together. And to make it look really neat and tidy, I am going to smear over all of the seams in this slab pot. So I'm going to smear the base so that you can't tell where the base stops and the walls start. And I'm also going to smear the seam between the ends of the slab that I wrapped around for the walls. I'm also going to tap the base of my planter and the top of my planter onto the canvas to try to make an even edge. And I'm going to use a baby wipe to smooth it all out. And from here, I have a really nice looking slab built pot, but I think it needs something extra. I mean, I need to put the subtractive and or additive methods to use to add some special pizzazz, a creative twist onto this slab planter. So my plan is to add another thin slab around the top edge of this planter to make it look like a terracotta pot, kind of adding a big lip around it in that way. And I'm also going to add bunny ears on each side because I'm going to glaze this to look like an orange terracotta pot that grew itself some bunny rabbit ears. Now to make these two ears, I needed 2 exactly matching pieces of clay that were the same size. To do that, if you need to do that same thing, close your eyes and pick up 2 pieces of clay. You'll be able to tell immediately just by feel which one is bigger. Whichever one is bigger, tear off a small piece of it and add it to the other pile of clay in the other hand. If you added too much, take a little bit back and continue this process until you, with your eyes closed, can feel that the 2 pieces of clay are exactly the same. Once I had 2 equal pieces of clay, it was easy for me to roll them into cones, attach them with scratching and scoring, and form them into bunny ear-like shapes with pinching, and then finally added some furry texture using the subtractive method and my wood and clay tools. I'm really excited to see what special details you put into your planters, But no matter what you do, when you're done, you need to make sure that you poke a straw through the bottom center of your planter so that the plant will have some drainage. And make sure that you use a toothpick or a skewer to write your name on the bottom.